In the year 170, a plague swept across the Roman Empire and killed nearly 2,000 people a day. Cities emptied, soldiers died faster than they could be replaced, and the man responsible for holding together 70 million lives across 3 continents did not run. He did not panic. He sat in his tent on the frozen edge of the empire, picked up a pen, and wrote himself instructions on how to stay sane. That man was Marcus Aurelius, and what he wrote in that tent would end up shaping the minds of generals, presidents, and founders for the next 2,000 years. Here is what almost nobody tells you about him. He never wanted the throne. He never trained his whole life to rule. He was pulled into power almost by accident, adopted into a family destined for the crown, and told from a young age that the weight of an empire would eventually fall on his shoulders whether he was ready or not. Most men in that position would have been consumed by it. Marcus Aurelius did something different. He built a private system inside his own mind. A set of rules he followed with brutal consistency, and that system is the reason his name still means something today, while most of the emperors around him have been forgotten. If you are building something right now, a company, a career, a reputation, listen closely, because what you are about to hear is not ancient trivia. It is a leadership blueprint, tested under the worst conditions a human being can face, and it still works. This is the story of how Marcus Aurelius led 70 million people using nothing but Stoic leadership principles, and by the end of this video you will understand exactly why his methods still outperform almost everything modern leadership books try to sell you. Secret 1. He ruled his reactions before he ruled anyone else. Before Marcus Aurelius commanded legions, he commanded his own mind. Every morning, before the demands of the empire reached him, he sat down and rehearsed the day ahead. He reminded himself that people would lie to him, betray him, disappoint him, and waste his time, and he decided in advance not to be shocked by any of it. This was not pessimism, it was preparation. Most leaders today do the opposite. They walk into their day reactive, unarmed, and then act surprised when a client cancels, a partner backs out, or an employee quits without warning. Every setback feels personal because they never built the mental armor first. Marcus Aurelius understood something that modern founders are still learning the hard way. The empire does not test your strategy first. It tests your composure first. If your composure breaks, your strategy never gets the chance to work. He trained himself to separate what he could control from what he could not, and he refused to spend energy on the second category. A general could lose a battle. A senator could scheme against him. A plague could take half his army. None of that was his to control. What was his to control was how he responded, how he thought, and what he did next. That single distinction, practiced daily for decades, is what allowed him to lead through war, betrayal, and disease without ever losing his grip on the empire. Secret 2. He treated obstacles as instructions, not interruptions. When Marcus Aurelius faced a setback, he did not ask why this was happening to him. He asked what this setback was training him to become. This is one of the most misunderstood pieces of Stoic philosophy, and it is exactly why his leadership held under pressure that would have broken almost anyone else. Picture the frontier of the empire during the Marcomannic Wars. Germanic tribes pushing across the border, the treasury drained by war and disease, half his advisors telling him retreat was the only option. A weaker man collapses in that moment. Marcus Aurelius did not see the war as a disaster interrupting his reign. He saw it as the exact material his character needed to be forged. He wrote that the impediment to action advances action, that what stands in the way becomes the way forward. Every obstacle was reframed the instant it appeared, not denied, not avoided, simply repurposed. This is the difference between someone who survives pressure and someone who is built by it. Most people treat hardship as something happening to them. Marcus Aurelius treated it as raw material handed to him, something to be shaped, something to extract strength from before moving forward. He never once asked the universe to make things easier. He only asked himself to become someone capable of handling what was already in front of him. This is the same mental shift you see in founders who survive their company nearly collapsing and come out sharper, calmer, and more dangerous than before. The event does not build you. Your response to the event builds you. Marcus Aurelius understood that at 19 years old, and he never forgot it, not even when the entire empire was resting on his decisions. And this right here, this refusal to be shaken, is only the beginning of how Marcus Aurelius' leadership Stoicism became the foundation for controlling an empire of 70 million people without ever losing himself in the process. By the time Marcus Aurelius was in his 40s, he was no longer just managing an empire. He was managing a slow, grinding collapse. The plague kept returning. The war on the northern frontier refused to end, and somewhere in the middle of all of it, he had to keep making decisions that affected millions of people who would never know his name, never see his face, and never understand the weight he carried to keep their world from falling apart. This is where most leaders break, not in the first crisis, in the 5th one, in the 10th one. When the emergency stops being an emergency and becomes the new normal, and you realize there is no finish line coming, only more weight, more decisions, more nights where sleep does not come easily. Marcus Aurelius lived inside that reality for nearly 2 decades, and the way he survived it reveals 3 more principles that separate leaders who last from leaders who burn out. Secret 3. He detached his identity from the outcome. Marcus Aurelius made an enormous number of decisions that failed. Wars he could not win outright. Advisors who betrayed him. A son, Commodus, who would go on to become one of the most disastrous rulers in Roman history, despite everything his father tried to instill in him. If Marcus Aurelius had tied his sense of self to the outcomes of his choices, he would have been destroyed by his own reign 100 times over. Instead, he separated the two. He judged himself by the quality of his effort and the honesty of his intentions, not by whether the world cooperated with his plans. This sounds simple until you try to actually live it. Most people cannot separate their worth from their results. A bad quarter feels like a personal failure. A rejected pitch feels like proof they are not good enough. Marcus Aurelius refused that trap entirely. He asked one question after every decision: did I act with integrity, given what I knew at the time? If the answer was yes, the outcome, good or bad, was none of his business to obsess over. This is not indifference. It is armor. A leader who ties their identity to every outcome becomes fragile, terrified of the next failure, desperate to control things that were never controllable in the first place. A leader who separates identity from outcome can absorb loss after loss and keep functioning, keep deciding, keep leading, because their sense of self was never on the table to begin with. Secret 4. He made silence part of his strategy. There is a reason Marcus Aurelius wrote his private reflections instead of giving speeches about them. He understood something that most modern leaders have completely lost. Not every thought needs an audience. Not every struggle needs to be announced. Not every doubt needs to be shared with the people depending on you. He processed his fear, his grief, and his exhaustion in private, in writing, alone, before he ever stepped in front of the Senate or his generals. By the time anyone saw him, he had already worked through the chaos internally. What they witnessed was the calm version of him, not because he was hiding weakness, but because he had already done the work of turning that weakness into resolve before it needed to be public. This is the exact opposite of how most people operate today. They process their doubt out loud, in real time, in front of the very people who need them to be steady. A founder venting every fear to their team does not build trust, it erodes it. Marcus Aurelius understood that leadership requires a private battlefield where the real struggle happens, so that the public version of you can remain someone people can actually rely on. Secret 5. He trained himself to expect difficulty, not fairness. One of the most repeated ideas in Marcus Aurelius' leadership Stoicism is his refusal to expect the world to be fair to him. He assumed every single morning that people would be ungrateful, that plans would go wrong, that betrayal was always possible. This was not bitterness, it was calibration. By expecting difficulty as the default, nothing that happened could catch him off guard enough to derail him. Compare that to how most people approach their goals. They expect a straight line. They expect effort to be rewarded on schedule. They expect loyalty to be returned, and fairness to be the rule rather than the exception. And when reality inevitably disappoints that expectation, it does not just hurt, it destabilizes them, because their entire foundation was built on an assumption that was never true to begin with. Marcus Aurelius built his foundation on the opposite assumption. Expect resistance. Expect setbacks. Expect the plan to survive contact with reality in a damaged, imperfect form. And when it did, he was never shattered by it, because he had already made peace with that outcome before it happened. This single mental adjustment, expecting difficulty instead of fairness, is one of the most underrated leadership tools in existence. And it is exactly what allowed a man who never wanted the throne to hold an empire together for 19 brutal years. He was closer to losing everything than most history books admit. And what happened next, the moment that nearly ended his reign completely, is where the real test of his character begins. In the year 1175, word reached Marcus Aurelius that Avidius Cassius, one of his most trusted generals, had declared himself emperor. Rome was in chaos. Rumors spread that Marcus Aurelius had died, which is the only reason Cassius dared to move. An entire province had shifted its loyalty overnight. Somewhere out there, a man Marcus Aurelius had personally promoted was now marching to take everything from him. This is the moment that tells you everything about who Marcus Aurelius actually was, not the version people quote on posters, the real one, the one tested by the ultimate betrayal a leader can face. Secret 6. He refused to let betrayal turn him into someone he did not want to be. Most rulers in Marcus Aurelius's position would have responded with rage, a swift, brutal execution. A message sent through blood so nobody would dare try it again. That is what power usually does to people. It gives them permission to become cruel and calls it strength. Marcus Aurelius did not take that permission. When he learned of the revolt, his first instinct was not vengeance, it was restraint. He said that if Cassius could be reasoned with, he wanted the chance to resolve it without more killing. He did not want a war that would cost more lives just to satisfy his own wounded pride. Before he ever had the chance to confront Cassius directly, one of Cassius's own soldiers assassinated him and sent his head to Marcus Aurelius as a gift, expecting gratitude and reward. Marcus Aurelius refused the head. He would not even look at it. He ordered it buried with respect, and refused to celebrate the death of a man who had once fought beside him. This is staggering when you actually sit with it. A man who had every justification for rage, every excuse to become ruthless, chose instead to protect his own character over his own comfort. He understood something most people in power never learn. Betrayal only wins twice, if it also turns you into someone you would not respect. He let Cassius take his loyalty. He refused to let him take his integrity too. This is the test almost every serious leader eventually faces. Someone you trusted turns on you. A partner burns you. An employee you promoted starts working against you behind closed doors. In that moment, the temptation is always to become harder, colder, meaner, to match the damage done to you. Marcus Aurelius proved something rare. You can protect yourself without becoming the thing that hurt you. You can respond to betrayal with boundaries instead of bitterness. That is a far harder discipline than winning any war, and it is the exact discipline that kept his leadership intact when it would have been so easy to let it rot from the inside. Secret 7. He built a system that could survive without him. This is the secret almost nobody talks about, and it is arguably the most important one. Marcus Aurelius did not just lead. He built structures, delegated authority, trained governors and generals, and created a machine of empire that could function even during the years he was away at war, sick, or simply exhausted. He understood something that a lot of ambitious people never fully grasp. If everything depends entirely on you, you have not built leadership, you have built a bottleneck. He trusted capable people with real authority. He surrounded himself with advisors who were allowed to disagree with him, and he listened when they did. He was not trying to be the smartest person in every room. He was trying to build a room full of people smart enough that the empire did not collapse the day he stopped breathing. That is the difference between a leader chasing control and a leader chasing continuity. Control feels powerful in the short term. Continuity is what actually lasts. This is the same principle behind every founder who eventually builds something bigger than their own daily involvement. The goal was never to be indispensable. The goal was to build something strong enough to survive your absence, your mistakes, even your death, because Marcus Aurelius knew, better than almost anyone in history, that no single person, no matter how disciplined, gets to hold everything together forever. He died in the year 180, likely from the very plague that had haunted his reign for over a decade, in a military camp far from Rome. Still working, still writing, still trying to become a slightly better version of himself until the very end. He never saw himself as a great man. He saw himself as someone constantly failing and constantly trying again. And that quiet, relentless honesty is the real reason Marcus Aurelius' leadership Stoicism has outlived empires, outlived generations, and still reaches people scrolling through their phones 2,000 years later, looking for exactly what he was looking for. A way to stay steady when everything around them refuses to be. If this rebuilt something in you today, that is exactly the kind of work we do here. Every week, we take the mindset of men like Marcus Aurelius and turn it into something you can actually use in your business, your leadership, your life. If you want more of this, you know what to do. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Stoic Founder so you never miss the next one.